Merry Christmas.
What if Frosty the Snowman was evil? The first snowstorm of winter had painted the small town white overnight. Streets were blanketed in fluffy drifts, trees sagged under the weight of their frosty coats, and the air was crisp with the promise of a perfect snow day. The children, their cheeks flushed from excitement and cold, laughed as they tumbled into the yard, eager to begin their grand project. "Over here!" shouted Sarah, her mittened hands patting a large mound of snow into shape. "This'll be his body." "Make it rounder," Billy called, dragging another massive snowball over. He grunted with effort, his boots skidding on the slick ground. The kids worked together, their teamwork turning 3 lumpy snowballs into a towering snowman. A worn scarf was wrapped around his neck. Buttons from Sarah's mom's sewing kit became his eyes. And an old corncob pipe was wedged into his round, smiling face. "Looks pretty good," Sarah said, stepping back to admire their work. "Something's missing," said Billy. He rummaged in his coat pocket and pulled out a top hat. Its fabric was faded, the ribbon frayed, but it still held an air of magic. "Found this in the attic yesterday. Let's see if it fits." As he placed the hat on the snowman's head, the wind seemed to hold its breath. For a moment, all was still. Then, with a sudden whoosh, a gust of icy wind swept through the yard, sending snowflakes spiraling into the air. The snowman's button eyes blinked, his twig arms creaked as they moved. The children stepped back, their eyes wide, as the snowman's grin seemed to grow. "Happy birthday," Frosty boomed, his deep voice jolly and full of wonder. He tipped his hat, his corncob pipe bobbing with each word. "Wow, what a day to come alive." The children erupted into cheers, laughing and dancing around their new friend. Frosty joined in, stomping his snowy feet and waving his twiggy arms. "Let's play hide and seek," Sarah suggested, and the game was on. Frosty moved surprisingly quickly, bounding over drifts and ducking behind trees. His laughter boomed through the crisp air, warm and infectious. As the afternoon wore on, the sun climbed higher in the sky. The snow glistened, but so did the water trickling from Frosty's base. He noticed the puddle forming beneath him and frowned. "What's happening to me?" he asked, his jolly voice faltering. "It's the sun," Billy said. "You're melting." Frosty's twig hands clutched his sides, his face a mix of confusion and fear. "Melting, but I just got here." "Don't worry," Sarah said quickly. "We'll take you to the North Pole. It's always cold there, and you'll never melt." Frosty's grin returned, though it seemed slightly smaller. "The North Pole? That sounds like a wonderful adventure." The children cheered, excited to plan their journey. They didn't notice the crow perched on a nearby branch, its beady black eyes fixed on Frosty. It cawed once, sharp and loud, before flying away, its dark wings cutting through the snowy sky. That evening, the children went inside to warm up and rest, leaving Frosty standing alone in the yard. The sky had turned a deep indigo, and the moon cast long shadows over the pristine snow. Frosty looked up, his button eyes reflecting the silvery light. "So quiet," he murmured to himself, his breath forming small puffs of frost. "I guess that's what it's like to be a snowman." The wind began to pick up, swirling around him with an unnatural chill. It wasn't the playful gusts of the afternoon. It was sharper, darker, as if it carried a whisper only Frosty could hear. "What's this?" Frosty said, his voice uncertain. The wind tugged at his hat, and for a moment it seemed as though it might blow away. Instead, the hat began to glow faintly, a strange, eerie light pulsing from its worn fabric. Frosty's grin faltered as the whisper grew louder, forming words that curled into his mind like frost over a windowpane. "Why let them control you?" the voice murmured, low and coaxing. Why melt away for their amusement? Why not take what you deserve? I don't understand, Frosty said, his twig hands clutching his hat. They gave you life and left you to wither, the voice continued, its tone dripping with malice. But you are snow and ice, strong and enduring. Take the power within you and make the world your own. Frosty's button eyes glowed red for a brief moment before returning to normal. His once jolly smile twisted into something sharp and unsettling. Make the world my own, he repeated, his voice tinged with a chill that hadn't been there before. Yes, I like the sound of that. The wind howled as Frosty's laughter rang out colder and darker than ever. By morning, the yard was eerily quiet. When the children ran outside to greet Frosty, they stopped short. Their once cheerful snowman stood stiff and unmoving, his button eyes glinting with an unfamiliar light. "Frosty?" Sarah asked hesitantly. Frosty turned to face them, his grin sharp and his voice low. "Good morning, children. Are you ready for winter?" The snow around him rose in a sudden flurry, forming jagged shapes that twisted and grew. Frosty stepped forward, his movements deliberate and ominous. "Let it snow," he said, his voice echoing with icy menace. "Let it snow forever." The morning sun struggled to break through the heavy clouds that had gathered over the town. Snowflakes fell steadily, blanketing everything in an oppressive silence. The children stared at Frosty, who now loomed over them with a sinister presence. His button eyes glinted like polished ice, and his jagged grin sent a chill down their spines. "Frosty," Sarah said, stepping forward hesitantly. "You're scaring us. What's going on?" Frosty tilted his head, his corncob pipe twitching slightly. "What's going on?" he repeated mockingly. "Why, nothing at all, my dear. I'm simply fulfilling my purpose to bring snow and cold and a little bit of fun." Billy frowned, pointing at the jagged mounds of ice that had formed around the yard. "That doesn't look like fun, Frosty. That looks like a trap." Frosty's grin widened, his twig arms spreading dramatically. "Oh, come now, Billy. Don't you see? Fun is exactly what this is. The most fun I've ever had. For once, I'm in control." He stomped his foot, and the snow around him surged upward, forming tall, twisted shapes. Slowly, the shapes came to life. Snowmen with jagged icicle teeth, hollow eyes, and claw-like branches for arms. They moved stiffly at first, then more fluidly, as Frosty's power coursed through them. "Meet my friends," Frosty said, his voice dripping with malice. "They're not much for conversation, but they're great at following orders." The children gasped as the snowmen began to march forward, their icy forms crunching with each step. "Run!" Sarah shouted, grabbing Billy's arm. The children darted across the yard, their boots slipping on the icy ground. Behind them, Frosty's laugh echoed, cold and unrelenting. "Run all you like," he called after them. "You can't escape winter." The children fled through the town, which had already begun to feel Frosty's influence. The streets were deserted, the houses buried under heavy drifts of snow. Icicles hung from power lines like menacing daggers, and the wind howled as if alive. "This isn't normal," Billy panted, as they ducked into an alley. "He's making it snow harder than ever." Sarah peered out from behind the corner, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. "We need help. Frosty's out of control. He's not our friend anymore." Billy's face twisted in determination. "Then we'll go to Santa. He'll know what to do." By the time the children reached the outskirts of the North Pole, the snowstorm had intensified. The wind whipped around them, carrying Frosty's eerie laughter on its currents. "Do you hear that?" Sarah whispered, clutching her scarf tightly. Billy nodded, his teeth chattering. "He's following us." They reached Santa's workshop, a warm glow spilling from the windows. Inside, elves scurried back and forth, preparing gifts and loading the sleigh. Santa himself stood at the center, his red suit immaculate and his eyes twinkling behind round glasses. "Children," Santa said, his deep voice filled with warmth, "what brings you here on such a cold day?" "It's Frosty," Sarah said, her words tumbling out in a rush. He's turned evil. He's using his magic to take over the town." Santa's smile faded, replaced by a look of concern. "Frosty? Evil? That doesn't sound like the snowman I know." "It's true," Billy said. "He's got an army of living snowmen, and he keeps saying stuff about making it winter forever." Santa stroked his beard thoughtfully. "This is troubling news indeed. Frosty's magic comes from his hat, a powerful but unpredictable artifact. If something has corrupted it, he may no longer be in control of his actions." Before Santa could say more, the workshop's doors flew open with a deafening crash. A gust of icy wind swept through, extinguishing the warm glow of the lamps. At the threshold stood Frosty, his eyes glowing an eerie blue. Behind him, his snowman army filled the doorway, their hollow faces frozen in grim determination. "Hello, Santa," Frosty said, his voice echoing through the workshop. "Mind if I drop in?" The workshop fell into an eerie silence as Frosty stepped inside, his heavy snow crunching with each step. His jagged smile sent chills through the elves, who froze mid-task, their eyes wide with fear. Frosty surveyed the room, his glowing blue gaze settling on Santa, who stood tall despite the icy wind swirling around him. "Frosty," Santa said, his voice calm but firm. "Why have you come here?" Frosty chuckled darkly, tipping his hat mockingly. "Why, Santa, isn't it obvious? I'm here to take your place." Santa's eyes narrowed, his gloved hands resting on his belt. "Take my place?" "Frosty, Christmas isn't about power. It's about bringing joy and love to the world." Frosty's grin twisted into a sneer. "Joy and love? Bah! What good are joy and love when you melt away the moment the sun comes out? I was given life, Santa, but no one told me it was temporary." The room grew colder, Frosty's anger manifesting in the frost, creeping up the walls, and the icy wind swirling faster. Santa stepped forward, his boots crunching against the frozen floor. "Frosty, I understand your fear, but this isn't the way. You were brought to life to make people happy, not to spread fear." Frosty's laughter echoed through the workshop. "Fear? Oh, Santa, you misunderstand. I don't want to spread fear. I want to spread winter. Endless, beautiful winter. No melting, no sun, just snow and ice forever." He raised his twig arms, and the snowmen outside surged forward, shattering the windows and swarming into the workshop. The elves screamed, scattering in every direction, as the snowmen overturned tables, crushed toys, and froze conveyor belts with their icy touch. "Stop this, Frosty," Santa bellowed, his voice booming over the chaos. Frosty turned to Santa, his eyes flashing dangerously. "Make me." With a sharp motion, Frosty hurled a shard of ice directly at Santa. The children screamed, but Santa raised his hand just in time, a shimmering shield of magic deflecting the attack. "I didn't want to do this," Santa said, his voice low. "But if you leave me no choice." He clapped his hands together and a warm golden light spread outward, melting the frost and halting the advancing snowmen. Frosty staggered backward, his jagged grin faltering as the light touched him. "Children," Santa called, turning to Sarah and Billy. "You must leave now. Frosty's magic is strong, but I can hold him off long enough for you to escape." "But what about you?" Sarah cried. Santa's eyes softened. "Don't worry about me, my dear. You need to find a way to stop Frosty before his magic consumes everything." The children hesitated, but when another wave of snowmen crashed through the door, they knew they couldn't stay. Billy grabbed Sarah's hand, and they bolted through the side entrance, ducking under Frosty's icy blasts as they ran. Frosty roared in frustration, his voice echoing through the workshop. "You can't run forever." Turning back to Santa, he sneered, "You think your magic can stop me? I was born of winter itself." Santa's face was grim. "Then let's see how winter fares against the warmth of Christmas spirit." The room erupted into a blinding clash of frost and golden light, the two forces colliding with a crackling roar. Outside, the children ran through the swirling blizzard, their breaths coming in quick frosty puffs. "What do we do now?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Billy's brow furrowed as he thought back to Santa's words. "Frosty's magic comes from his hat. If we can destroy it, or maybe purify it, he might turn back to normal." "But how do we get close enough to do that?" Sarah asked. Billy's eyes lit up. "We don't need to get close. We just need a distraction." He turned and pointed toward the forest, where the reindeer were kept. "If we can lure Frosty away from the workshop, maybe we can figure out a way to take the hat while he's distracted." Sarah hesitated, glancing back at the glowing workshop, where Frosty's laughter and Santa's booming voice still echoed. "Are you sure this will work?" Billy nodded. "It has to. For Santa. For Christmas." The blizzard howled through the forest, bending the trees under its frozen weight. Sarah and Billy trudged through the deep snow, their scarves pulled tight against the biting wind. In Billy's hands was a glowing lantern filled with golden light, one of Santa's enchanted tools, taken from the workshop during their escape. "This has to work," Billy said, glancing over his shoulder. "It's the only way to draw him out." "Are you sure he'll follow us?" Sarah asked, her voice muffled by her scarf. Billy nodded grimly. "Frosty won't let anything that powerful go. He'll think it's a threat, or something he can use to make himself stronger." A low, rumbling laugh echoed through the trees, sending a chill up their spines. "Well, well," Frosty's voice boomed, carried on the icy wind. "What have we here? My little friend's trying to run away?" The children turned to see Frosty stepping out of the storm, his glowing blue eyes fixed on the lantern. His snowman army followed close behind, their jagged forms eerily silent as they moved through the drifts. Billy held the lantern higher, forcing his voice to stay steady. "You want it, Frosty? Come and get it!" With that, he turned and ran deeper into the forest, Sarah close behind. Frosty's grin widened, and he raised his twig arms. The snow under his feet surged forward like a living wave, carrying him and his army after the children. "Run, run, little ones," Frosty called, his voice echoing through the trees. "You can't escape winter." The children reached a clearing at the edge of a frozen lake. The surface was slick and gleaming, surrounded by tall pines draped in heavy snow. Billy placed the lantern on the ice, its warm light casting long shadows. Sarah turned to him, her breath coming in short, frosty puffs. "Now what?" Billy knelt by the lantern, his eyes darting to the forest. "Now we wait. He'll come for the light. And when he does, we grab the hat." Before Sarah could respond, the snow exploded around them as Frosty arrived, carried by his icy wave. He towered over the clearing, his grin sharp and cruel. "Well, isn't this cozy?" he said, stepping onto the ice. You've brought me a gift. How thoughtful. The snowmen surrounded the clearing, their hollow eyes glinting in the lantern's glow. You don't have to do this, Frosty, Sarah shouted, stepping forward. This isn't you. You're supposed to bring joy, not fear. Frosty chuckled, his corncob pipe tilting. Joy? Oh, my dear. Joy is overrated. Power. Now that's worth something. He reached for the lantern, but as his twig hand closed around it, the light flared, sending a wave of warmth through the clearing. Frosty stumbled back, his grin faltering. What is this? He growled, shaking his arm as if the light had burned him. Billy stepped forward, his voice steady. It's Santa's magic. The magic of Christmas spirit. It's stronger than you, Frosty. Stronger than your hate. Frosty's eyes narrowed and his jagged grin returned. Stronger than me? We'll see about that. He raised his arms and the snowmen lunged forward. The children darted across the ice, their boots sliding as the snowmen pursued them. Sarah grabbed the lantern, holding it high to keep the creatures at bay. Billy, she shouted, what now? Billy's eyes darted to Frosty, who was advancing slowly, his gaze fixed on the lantern. We have to get the hat, he yelled. How? Billy didn't answer. Instead, he reached down, grabbing a loose branch from the ice. Holding it like a hockey stick, he turned to face Frosty. Hey, Frosty, he shouted. Catch this. With a swing, Billy knocked the lantern across the ice, sending it skidding toward the far end of the lake. Frosty's eyes widened, and he surged forward, his snow twisting and swirling as he chased the light. For a moment, his back was turned, and his hat was unguarded. Now, Billy shouted. Sarah darted forward, her boots slipping as she lunged for Frosty's hat. Her fingers closed around its brim, just as Frosty turned, his jagged grin twisting into a snarl. Give that back, he roared, the snow around him rising in a furious storm. Sarah stumbled backward, clutching the hat tightly. No, you don't deserve it anymore. Frosty lunged for her, but Billy threw himself between them, holding the branch like a shield. Stay back! The lantern's glow brightened, flooding the clearing with golden light. Frosty froze mid-step, his jagged edges softening as the warmth reached him. His glowing eyes flickered, then dimmed. No, he whispered, his voice trembling. I don't want to disappear. The snowmen crumbled into harmless drifts as Frosty began to shrink. His grin faded, replaced by a look of sorrow. Sarah stepped forward, still clutching the hat. Frosty, you don't have to disappear, but you have to let go of the anger. Let the magic be what it was meant to be, joyful. Frosty's button eyes glistened with what looked like tears. I don't know how. Billy placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder, nodding. Together, they carefully placed the hat back on Frosty's head. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the red glow faded completely, and Frosty's jolly voice returned. Happy birthday, he exclaimed, looking around in surprise. What happened? Did I miss something? The blizzard dissipated as Frosty stood in the clearing, his familiar jolly grin returning to his face. The sharp, menacing aura that had once surrounded him was gone, replaced by the warm cheerfulness the children remembered. Wow, Frosty exclaimed, looking around at the shimmering snow-covered trees. It's beautiful out here. Did I do all this? Sarah and Billy exchanged a look, unsure how to respond. Well, Billy said hesitantly, you had a little moment, but it's okay now. Frosty scratched his snowy head, his button eyes filled with confusion. A moment? Huh, that doesn't sound like me. Before the children could explain further, the golden glow of Santa's magic appeared on the horizon. Moments later, Santa himself stepped into the clearing, his red coat gleaming and his beard frosted with snow. Ho, ho, ho! Santa's booming laugh echoed through the forest, filling the air with warmth. Well, isn't this a sight for sore eyes? Frosty's grin widened as he tipped his hat. Santa, good to see you, old friend. Santa's smile faltered slightly as he approached. Frosty, do you remember what just happened? Frosty shook his head. Not really. 1 minute I'm having fun with the kids, and the next I'm here with... Wait, why do I feel like I owe someone an apology? Santa's eyes softened, and he placed a hand on Frosty's snowy shoulder. You've been through something difficult, my friend. The magic in your hat was tampered with, and it brought out feelings you didn't know how to handle. Frosty's smile faded, and his twig arms drooped. I didn't hurt anyone, did I? The children stepped forward, their faces filled with reassurance. No, Sarah said. You scared us a little, but you didn't hurt anyone, and you stopped when it mattered. Yeah, Billy added. You're back to being the Frosty we know. That's what counts. Frosty's grin returned, though it was smaller and more hesitant. Thanks, kids. I don't know what I'd do without you. Together they returned to the workshop, which was slowly coming back to life. The elves, now unafraid, worked quickly to repair the damage Frosty's snowman had caused. The warmth of the workshop melted away the lingering frost, restoring it to its usual cheerful state. Santa guided Frosty to the center of the workshop, where the children helped decorate him with a fresh scarf and new buttons. There, Sarah said, stepping back to admire their work. Now you're good as new. Frosty chuckled, his laugh warm and hearty. I feel like a brand new snowman, thanks everyone. Santa knelt beside Frosty, his expression thoughtful. Now, Frosty, there's one last thing we need to address. You were worried about melting, weren't you? Frosty nodded slowly. Yeah, it's scary, Santa. I don't want to just disappear. Santa placed a hand on Frosty's hat. The magic in this hat is a gift, but it needs to be protected. If you stay here at the North Pole, you'll never have to worry about melting again. Frosty's eyes lit up. Stay here with you? Really? Santa smiled. Of course, and whenever the world needs a little extra holiday cheer, you can join me on my sleigh. How does that sound? Frosty's grin returned, wider than ever. That sounds perfect. As the evening wore on, the workshop hummed with activity. The children helped the elves put the finishing touches on the presents, while Frosty entertained everyone with jokes and songs. Before long, it was time for Santa to take off on his sleigh. The children stood outside with Frosty, waving as Santa prepared to depart. Thank you for everything, kids, Santa said, his voice warm. You've saved Christmas, and a very special friend. The children beamed as the sleigh lifted into the air, its bells jingling against the crisp night sky. As the stars twinkled above, Frosty turned to the children, his voice soft. I owe you both a lot. You didn't give up on me, even when I wasn't myself. That's what friends do, Sarah said, smiling. Billy nodded. And now you've got all the time in the world to keep being you. Frosty's grin was full of warmth as he tipped his hat. You kids are the best. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, Frosty, they called, laughing, as his jolly voice echoed through the snow-covered trees.